Hi guys. I've just made this fundamental shift since I found Anna Baring. I have since made a playlist for her because I think this is extremely important that we understand this about our nature, about our past, about the development of our consciousness. I have never heard anybody summarize this in such clarity as Anna Baring does. Our development from this lunar era into the solar era. What happened to our consciousness, right? It's had such a profound impact on me that I now understand that, yes, the myth of the fall of man. And it's everywhere you look, in all the podcasts, in all the New Age movements, we are talking about Earth as a place of low density, of low vibration, of matter being the lowest form of vibration. And this is so wrong. This is so wrong. Not only are her presentations absolutely fantastic, I want to share with you, I've just uploaded a small clip where I explained that we are being told there is a heaven and there's an earth, and the earth is the fallen word. It's matter. It's a place of low density, low vibration. And I argued in a post on Facebook that that's not true, that actually life itself is the highest form of vibration, the biggest miracle there is, okay? And I want to show you here, there's this talk by Max Wellmann about whether or not we have free will in the nature of self. And there is a passage here that I want to draw your attention to, because he explains the what is going on in our mind in order to facilitate something as simple as what we take for granted as speech, okay? And I'll leave the link for that below as well.
Was well aware of the implications. And so his own attempt to rescue conscious free will, noting that although the wish followed the readiness potential by 300 milliseconds, the wish still preceded the actual act by 200 milliseconds. And that was time enough, so he argued, to veto the act. And so he said, we might not have free will, but we do have free won't. So we can deliberately decide not to do something.
So they're debating, obviously, free will. And now he's going into the detailed deconstruction of what happens when we speak. Listen to this. This is amazing.
In turn, of course, raises other kinds of problem, because you might say, look, it's easy to accept that there are lots of processes you're required to decide to wish to do something. But if you decide, given the situation you're in, that you won't do it, wouldn't that itself require deliberation of some kind? So, in fact, the decision not to do something, given that you want to do it, could actually be regarded as more complex than the wish to do it. These relationships between conscious experiences and mental processing, shall we say, don't apply only in the case of free will. So far we've been talking just about very simple movements. But if one goes to the other extreme and reflects on what's going on, what I'm doing at the moment, for example, which is speaking to you, that's much more complicated than just moving a finger. And we think of, I'm doing this consciously. So what's the role of consciousness in what I'm doing? Speech production is another major area which has been extensively explored within psychological science, to go through just some of the main stages which have to be involved. To begin with, there has to be an idea to express. So when I'm talking to you, I've got some sort of encoding of meaning in my mind brain somewhere, which needs to be expressed in words. And then I have to use words. So somewhere out of a kind of internal dictionary, I have to access the right words. And then I'm speaking to you in English, and so somewhere in my mind I have to access the syntactic rules of English. I have to string the words together into a meaningful sentence. And then somehow or other, all that planning needs to be converted into motor programs that exit from the central nervous system and make the articulatory system operate in an appropriate way. And the articulatory system is extremely complex. It involves the larynx, the lips, opening, closing, breathing, coordination. The tongue is moving backwards and forwards within the mouth. The nasal cavities opening and closing. The tongue might make as many as 12 adjustments of shape per second. Within 1 minute of discourse, as many as 10 to 15,000 neuromuscular events. In other words, instructions coming from the central nervous system to make just that last bit work. But then I ask myself, what am I actually conscious of? Well, the only thing I'm actually conscious of is what I hear myself say. Now, I can see my hand moving around, and it has a certain intonation pattern as well. But that results, what I hear myself say results from all this planning and processing and instruction of the articulatory system. And none of that actually enters my normal consciousness. In fact, there is a sense in which I'm only conscious of what I want to say after I've actually said it. Prior to that, it was just if you like, a preconscious thought. And speech production isn't a special case either. Consider, for example, the sentence which I've just placed on the screen for you. What you need to do with the sentence is just read it silently to yourself. And once you've read it, you should have what we call inner speech. If you're like me and a normal English speaker, what you hear is a kind of inner version of, if we don't increase the dustmen's wages, they will refuse to take the refuse. Now, there's something really interesting about that, and that is that one word appears twice, and that's the word refuse. In one's verbal imagery, the stress patterns are different for the two appearances. So the first time it appeared, came up immediately as refuse, and the second time it appeared as refuse. And the first version, refuse, is a verb, and the second, refuse, is a noun. And the question is, how did you know? And the only conclusion one can draw, really, is that the syntactic and semantic analysis that you needed to carry out to determine the appropriate meanings of that word must have taken place prior to the allocation of the stress patterns. And that, in turn, must have taken place prior to the verbal images entering your awareness. And like speech, where I wasn't aware of all the processes that preceded my ability to say something, when you read, you're not aware of any of the processes required for you to read something. Now we're going to do something really counterintuitive. Just decide how well you're following the argument so far, and simply note what thoughts come to your mind. Just observe those thoughts. Now, it doesn't really matter what did come to mind. You might have thought, I'm with what's going on so far, I understand it, or I'm not sure about some of it, or, I really disagree with some of this. But it really doesn't matter for the purposes of this little experiment. All that matters is that a thought did come to mind, and when it did come to mind, like in the case of the reading, it manifested in the form of inner speech. And now you have to ask yourself, where did that thought come from? And just as before, we have little or no introspective access to all the detailed processes that gave rise to that thought. So somehow or other, in order to come to your conclusion about whether you're following this argument or not, you somehow had to analyze the meaning of the question involving reading, with all its complexity. In order to get that meaning, once you've got that meaning, you had to access your global memory system or your global knowledge store, your understanding of the whole topic, if you like, the nature of mind or your own mind or whatever. And somehow you had to make a judgment about how well the arguments that I'm presenting here fit into your own understanding, your own intuitive understanding of all this. You either came to the conclusion that yes, you were following it, no, you weren't following it, yes, you agreed with it, no, you didn't agree with it, and so on. And again, you're only conscious of the thought after it arises. You're not conscious of these preliminary processes. What you're conscious is of the conclusion of those processes. So in 1991, I did an analysis of behavioral and brain sciences called Is Human Information Processing Conscious?, where I did a far more detailed analysis of the whole of human information processing and looked at far greater detail than we're able to do here. Many other processes as well, including creativity and memory and learning and so on. And again, free will is not a special case. For the moment, I just want to suggest to you a general rule which follows from the examples that I've actually given you, which is that conscious phenomenology usually follows the information processing to which it most closely relates. And that applies, as we've demonstrated, not just to conscious wishes to do something simple or to act or that wish or not, as in the case of free will experiments, conscious speech production, conscious reading, and conscious thinking, to all forms of conscious human information processing.